All right. Well, let's take a look at our series. I'm glad you've joined us. If you're a guest, we've been in a series that I've entitled Wise Ways, spelling it W-A-Z-E. And the reason why is there's an app called Waze that kind of directs you around problems. Well, the book of Proverbs is just like that. It gives us wisdom and direction, how to avoid the accidents, how to avoid the heartaches, how to avoid the problems in life. And so we are in this series, and I want to, this fourth part of the series, I've entitled Getting Help Along the Way. Before we get started, I want you to watch in a second or two a movie clip from the movie Patch Adams starring Robin Williams. Now, I have to tell you, I haven't seen the movie. But this clip is a clip I think, I want to set it up for you. Patch is a fellow patient at this institution. And Patch's perspective of reality gets adjusted by his co-patient at this place, him asking, "What do you see?" More about that in a minute. Take a look at the screen. I chose that clip because it illustrates getting help along the way. Patch, he's trying to solve this problem, and so he seeks out a fellow patient there to find the answer and solve the problem. The irony here is the answer is not just in Patch's hands, his fingers. But the irony is the answer involves the fingers of others and other hands as well. And that's exactly what our text today teaches us. To those who would walk in wise ways to follow wisdom, it tells us in Proverbs chapter 15, verse 22, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. Or Proverbs 11:14 says, for lack of guidance a nation fails, but many advisors make victory sure. Proverbs 20, verse 18, make plans by seeking advice. If you wage war, obtain guidance. Let's pray together and ask the Lord to help us with this message. Father, I thank you this morning for the Word of God and for this truth that you've deposited into my heart. For, oh God, the things that you've expressed to me that you want communicated today. I thank you, oh God, for touching each of us to hear your word and then respond to it, oh God, and learn from it, oh God, to gain wisdom and walk in wise ways. Thank you for doing that in our lives this morning in Jesus' name. And everyone who agreed said, I don't know why I feel the need to tell you this, but I want to share with you that when we show a clip like that or any of the clips that we're showing, we aren't just showing them off of a DVD or pirating them. We've paid for those and the royalties in the service to be able to do that again because we want to walk in wise ways, okay? So I just, for what it's worth, let you know that. I want you to first of all notice that the wise person, according to our text this morning, makes plans. Now, I almost thought about doing a poll everywhere thing that we put up on the screen and you answer with your smartphone device and answer how many of you don't make plans, or how many of you plan sometimes, or how many of you always plan, or something like that, and see, because you know why I thought about answering that? Because some of us are planners and some of us aren't. Don't elbow the person next to you. Some of us planning comes very easily for us, and some of us it's a chore, it's a job. But clearly here, the Proverbs tell us that we should make plans, and that plans will fail when we don't make plans. Someone once said, and I'm sure many of us have heard this, if one fails to plan, then one plans to fail. Or there's this guy, Fitzhugh Dobson, I never heard of him before, but he said, without goals and plans to reach them, you're like a ship that has set sail with no destination. We are, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of watching and looking at the Apollo program is attempting to be revived so that we can place a man again on the moon. I think the goal is by 2024 to put somebody out there again. And really it's a part of a plan so that we make the moon a hopping point to go from the moon to Mars. And there's all kinds of reason for that and that. But if you don't have this plan put together, reaching Mars or reaching the moon will never happen. I want you to notice with me that the wise way says our planning should have the quality of getting guidance, help, or the counsel of others in making our plans. There's two principles here that we should consider in making our plans. First of all, consider this principle in planning. Be cautious of trusting your own judgment. Be cautious of trusting your own judgment. Proverbs 12:15 says, the way of the fool seems right to him, but a wise man listens to advice. Now, many of the times, if not most of the times, a lot of our decision making is based on emotion. Whether you like to admit it or not, we tend to make a lot of decisions based on emotion. And then what we do, we made this decision and we kind of cherry pick the facts or support that will take and justify our decision. Perhaps this works out well, but a lot of times it doesn't work out so well if it's just based on emotion. It can end in disaster. How many of you have heard the story? Apparently it's a true story of a bricklayer responding to the insurance company after he had an accident with a barrel full of bricks. Anybody hear that one before? Well, let me share it with you, and many of you may remember it. But apparently this bricklayer, he had this accident, and after filling out the accident form, the insurance company responded back to him, and there were several blocks that they asked for him to explain. It'll be clear as we go through it. So he says, "Dear sir, I'm writing in response to your request for additional information. In block 3 of the accident reporting form, I put poor planning as the cause of my accident. Your letter back to me asked that I should explain more fully the details to be sufficient. And I am a bricklayer by trade, and the day of the accident, here is what happened. I was working alone on the roof of a 6-story building." First warning flag, working alone, 6-story building. "When I completed my work, I discovered that I had about 500 pounds of bricks left over on the top of the brick building. And rather than carry all of these bricks down by hand, I decided to lower them down in a barrel using a pulley, which fortunately was attached to the side of the building at the 6th floor. I loaded the bricks. Before I loaded the bricks, I had tied off the rope to the pulley down below and secured the rope and then loaded the bricks. Once the bricks were loaded, I pushed the barrel out away from the building out into the air. Then I went back down to the ground, untied the rope, holding it tightly to ensure the slow descent of 500 pounds of bricks. You will note, though, in block number 11, I listed my weight as 135 pounds. Due to my surprise at being jerked off the ground so suddenly, I lost presence of mind and forgot to let go of the rope. Needless to say, I proceeded up at a rather rapid rate up the side of the building. In the vicinity of the 3rd floor, I met the barrel coming down. This explains my fractured skull and my broken collarbone. Slowed only slightly, I continued my rapid ascent, not stopping until the fingers of my right hand were 2 knuckles deep into the pulley. Fortunately, by this time, I regained my presence of mind and was able to hold the rope tightly in spite of my pain. At approximately the same time, however, the barrel of bricks hit the ground. The bottom fell out of the barrel. Without the weight of the bricks, the barrel now weighed approximately 50 pounds. I refer you again to block number 13. My weight is 135 pounds. I'm sorry, in block 11. As you might imagine, I began a rapid descent back down the side of the building. In the vicinity of the third floor, I met the barrel coming up. This accounts for the 2 fractured ankles and lacerations of my leg and lower body. The encounter with the barrel slowly enough to lessen my injuries when I fell onto the pile of bricks, and fortunately only 3 vertebrae were cracked. I'm sorry to report, however, that as I lay there on the pile of bricks, in pain, unable to stand, watching the barrel 6 stories above me, I again lost presence of mind and let go of the rope. Oh, the moral of the story is, be cautious of your own judgment. You know, this proverb tells us, make plans, and when you make plans, be cautious of your own judgment. And the second observation that I would refer you to here in making plans is that big things require more insight. You know, Proverbs 20, verse 18 that I shared with you, it says, make plans by seeking advice. If you wage war, a really big thing, and of course, you and I aren't going to wage war. I don't know, if you're a parent, you might wage war. But, anything that's a big deal, make sure that you obtain guidance. Now, I really like the author Stephen Covey. How many of you here have read his best-selling book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Let me see your hand. Have you read his book? Oh, let me tell you, you got to get his book. I would encourage every teenager, every young adult to get Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and read the book. And you'll highlight some things, and man, you'll see that this is an incredible book. One of the things that he says is, make time for planning. Remember, we're talking about big things require more insight. Make time for planning. Wars are won in the general's tent. Now, it strikes me that that's really a paraphrase of make plans by seeking advice. If you wage war, obtain guidance. You see, the bigger the task, the bigger the event, the greater the need for planning. Or the bigger the task, the bigger the event, the more detailed the needs of planning need to be. Or the bigger the task, the bigger event, the more time needed in planning. You know, probably the biggest reason why most of us don't plan is because planning can take so much time, and we just want to get on with it, and we figure we'll figure it out as we go. Can I tell you, one of the vacations, I don't know if the kids and Elka remember it this way or not, but one of the greatest vacations I feel like that we ever had as a family was when we went to Disney World when the kids were small. Now, it wasn't because of where we went. It was. I mean, it's a magical place, and it's really neat to go there as a family, especially when kids are small and their eyes are so wide and just mesmerized by all that stuff. But for me, the reason why it was one of the most relaxing and greatest vacations that we had is because it was one of the best planned vacations that we ever had. And the reason for that is I bought one of these books that talked about visiting Disney World and what to do and all that. If you've never gone, let me give you some advice here real quick. If you go to Disney World or Disneyland, the first thing that you want to do is to go to the very back of the park, to the rides and the events in the back of the park. Why? Because nobody's going back there. They're starting as soon as they come in. And the other thing that you want to do, go to the back of the park and go counterclockwise through the park. Why? Because everybody else is going clockwise. And it will just ease the burden of getting through the park. The other thing that I found in planning and listening to the advice of some other people looking at this was to take and schedule when you leave the park differently from when everybody else is. And you go at that time of the day when everybody's going to lunch, you leave there and you go over to the water parks and you stay at the water park for a couple of hours, and then you come back to a different park in the evening. And it was planning. But let me tell you, it took a lot of time to put the plan together and figure it out. Remember, probably the biggest reason why most of us don't plan is because it takes time. But let me tell you something here. Consider that someone calculated for every minute you spend planning, it saves you 10 minutes in execution. Now, I don't know about you, but I think about the return on that. The return on that is incredible. You know what that is? That's 1,000% return. If I could tell you today that if you would give me $10 and I guarantee you it will return $1,000 for you, I don't know about you, but I'd line up. By the way, those things that are promised on TV, don't fall for it. But in time management, this is true. Although it will take time, every 10 minutes that you spend, every minute that you spend will save you 10 minutes in execution, 1,000% return of your energy and investment. No wonder the wise way is make plans. Secondly, I want you to see that those who would walk in wise ways seek counsel. Proverbs 15:22, plans fail for a lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Now let me ask you this question. And I ask it because I ask myself that question. Here's a question. Why don't you ask for help? Why don't you ask for counsel and advice? Some of the reasons I thought were, is it I don't ask because I have fear I'm imposing upon them? Or is it because I don't want to seem weak. I don't want to seem that, I don't have it all together. Or is it because of fear? Do we fear I don't have time for you, or their rejection? Or could it be we don't ask because of pride? You might recall that one of the Proverbs, actually it's found in Proverbs 16, verse 18, says that pride goes before. Yeah, I know, I was going to say it that way too. Actually, it doesn't say that when you quote the verse correctly, it really implies that, but it says pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit, which is pride, goes before a fall. So you're right. It goes before a fall. It goes before destruction. Now, I painfully, literally experienced the truth of this proverb in Proverbs 16, verse 18. Because I failed to ask for counsel. I failed to ask for help along the way. And I decided that I could do this project all by myself. And, I've asked myself even, was it because I was afraid I was going to impose upon somebody or fear, whatever it was. But I decided that we were going to cut the cable. This was before we moved here. And in order to cut the cable and still be able to access news and all those things, streaming services and all that stuff, I thought, I'm going to do some research. I'm going to find out what antenna that I need and the area that we're living in North Texas that will be a good antenna. And I can't put it on my roof because my HOA, my homeowners association, won't allow it exposed. It's got to be up inside the attic. So I found this antenna. It would catch the broadcast from about 50 miles. It also needed to have a rotor to where I could turn it and direct it towards the station I was trying to pick up and all that. And I ordered it. Guess where I ordered it from? Yeah, you got it. I ordered it from Amazon. It came to my house. I even plugged it in downstairs, tried it out, looked pretty good, and I thought, well, when I get time, I'm going to put this thing up in my attic. So the day arrived, and I got the ladder out, an 8-foot folding ladder. I got it up into the attic. Elka's away at work. I got my power drill and all the tools that I thought I needed, and I put it up in the attic, and I set up the ladder in a place that I think is about the right place, and the ladder, catch this again, it's an 8-foot extension ladder, and probably the truss that I need to put the lag bolt in is at 12 feet. You see the danger coming here? So I get up on the ladder, and I'm standing on probably the second to the top rung, and as I'm standing on it, I see that, okay, well, the leg of this ladder is at the very edge of the plywood in my attic where they've decked it. If I go any farther than that, it's going to be out into the insulation and through the ceiling. So I put the ladder out as far as I can. I get up on it and second to the last rung, and I see that I have to lean out a little bit with my power drill. Yeah, you're right. Whoa. And with this power drill to put this lag up in here. And here's a couple of pieces of his advice for you. When we're talking about advice, never stand on the second rung of the ladder without somebody holding the ladder. As I lean out, my weight distribution is different. And what I didn't know is as I placed the front part of the ladder to the edge of the plywood, I didn't think or see or know that plywood was not supported with another truss. And so my weight distribution all of a sudden puts all of the weight on the front part of that ladder. The plywood, although it didn't break, went like this, and the ladder went one way, the drill went another way, and I went another way. The next thing I remembered, I was sitting on the couch. My mother-in-law, I don't even remember this, climbed up the ladder into the attic because she had heard this noise of everything falling, coached me and helped me down the ladder, and I was sitting on the couch, blood running down the back of my neck and down my face as I had been knocked out because I had failed to get help along the way. I want to tell you today that as I put my finger here and my finger here and here, I am reminded that I need to get help because I don't need another hole in my head. Those are 3 places in my skull where they drilled into my skull so they could cut out a part of my skull to evacuate the blood that had built up between the leathery part of my brain and my skull to evacuate that blood. I want to tell you, it's important to seek help along the way. And this proverb makes it clear. You see, here's something important to remember in this. In seeking help along the way, it requires humility. Say humility with me. Humility. Now, whether it's fear of rejection, whether it's a fear of seeming weak, or whether it's pride, humility is the antidote for that. And understand that the wise man understands, the wise woman understands, the wise person understands that seeking humility and practicing humility leads to a sign of wisdom. Listen again, the way of the fool seems right to him, but a wise man or woman listens to advice. Can you say this with me? I don't always see things objectively. Come on, we could say that together. I don't always see things objectively. Now, I know your temptation is to look at the person next to you and say, you don't always see things objectively. But the truth of the matter is that I need to embrace this so that there's humility in me and in every decision that I make. I need to remind myself every day. I need to remind myself every day I don't always see things objectively. And when I do, I will humble myself. I will seek advice. I will ask for help. You see, an admission of I don't always see things objectively means I don't always understand it from every angle. I don't always understand it from every nuance. And if you do, you're full of pride. And remember, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Seeking advice from others admits that my choices are based on emotion and times aren't objective. And seeking advice requires humility so that I might follow wise ways. Finally, doing this, seeking advice from others, rewards the seeker of advice. Proverbs 15:22, Proverbs 1:14, the end of those verses say, but with many advisors, they succeed. There's a reward. But with many advisors, that makes victory sure. Now, there's a caveat that needs to be said here, and that's this. That, it ought to be obvious that obtaining wisdom from foolish advisors is no better than trusting in purely your own judgment. You see, the quality or the kind of counsel that you seek is important. It should go without saying. Scriptures reveal the plight of people and individuals who follow their own judgment or wrong advice. Let me take you in your mind's eye for a moment to when the Israelites were settling first in the Promised Land. They'd been following after God and following His direction and seeking God for counsel and seeking God for advice. And one day there was this group of people who showed up where they were camped, and this group of people were so dirty and dusty. Their camels, their donkeys looked like that they were just so worn out. Their clothes were worn. Their wineskins were cracked and dried out. Their bread was old and moldy. And they said to the Israelites, we have heard of the great God that you serve and what God has done and what God is doing. And we have heard that God has sent you here to take this land. But we live a far ways away from you. We don't live close. We aren't your close neighbors. But because we've heard of what God is doing through, we want to make a treaty with you. So being foolish and not seeking God's counsel, it says they did not inquire of the Lord. They made a treaty with His people only to find out that they were deceived and they were really the Gibeonites who were their, so to speak, backyard neighbor. And it created all kinds of issues. Point being, make sure that you get godly counsel and godly advice. Because godly counsel and advisors, even if it's not a spiritual issue, they will have varied points of view using scripture-based principles. And remember this, principles are universal. They apply in 2019, will apply in 2050, and have applied all the way back to 1900. Principles. Seeking advisors gives you a broader understanding on what to build on. Can I tell you one of my favorite places to go to, speaking of a variety of advisors, one of my favorite places to go to when I can't figure something out, when I'm trying to do something, is what? YouTube. I've used it to figure out how to put a landscape lighting line underneath my driveway without tearing up the sidewalk, or to put a conduit across, or how to repair a sprinkler system. On my car, things that need to be. But here's something that I've noticed. It doesn't do me a whole lot of good if I just watch one video. Because that one video is only that one person's perspective, and it may or may not have the correct angle for me to see what I want to get done. Success is found in a multitude of advisors, many advisors, godly advisors. Can I tell you, sir, the reason why God has given you a wife is to help you with seeing things more objectively. Can I tell you, wife, the reason why God has given you a husband is to see things from a different perspective. And that's why God has given the church, and that's why God has given his word. So the question here today is this: what are you planning? You ought to be making plans. If you're not making plans, the wise person who will follow wise ways makes plans. What are you planning? And if so, in your planning, have you sought the advice and the counsel of others? Maybe you're planning for a wedding. Maybe you're planning your career. Maybe you're planning what you're going to do with your grandkids and how you're going to interface with your grandkids. Maybe you're planning retirement. But I have a question for you, and that is this: have you planned for the single most important event in your life? No, not the grandkids, not the career, not the wedding, not even retirement, but eternity. It can't be eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Tomorrow is eternity. And if you have not planned how to enter eternity, you haven't made the most important plan and decision of all. Would you stand together with me, please? Every head bowed and every eye closed. Father, thank you for your word today.